Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time thanks to your generous support, shares and views, with multiple uploads every week to help share the rich history of monsters, locations and mythologies of D&D. Bronze Dragons! One of my favourites for several dungeon mastering reasons. They are third in the pecking order of the most powerful metallic dragons, very much devoted to duty, law and order. And they love observing and interacting with smaller creatures, particularly humans. And keep in mind, the dragons of Toril have watched the steady evolution and development of the human race ever since the dragons arrived on the planet at the end of the Age of Thunder, when humans were little more than primitive savages. Bronze dragons are more often encountered in their full draconic form when they are younger, and on more than a few occasions the crew of a sinking ship has been rescued by a bronze dragon, or an extremely hazardous encounter with a sea serpent or other ocean leviathan has been miraculously avoided thanks to bronze dragons' intervention. Among draconic society, now starting to re-establish itself on Toril after thousands of years under the curse of the cruel Dragon Rage mythal, the bronze dragons often serve the wise gold dragons as diplomats and as is the way of draconic diplomacy, often brutal enforcers of the peace. This explains much about why bronze dragons admire humans the most of all the civilized races of humanoids. First of all, as the bronze dragons' favoured territory is rocky ocean coastlines, they get to see humans the most often, as humans more often than most other races tend to form settlements right next to bodies of water. While dwarves live in mountain holes and the elves love their forests, halflings live in gentle hills with babbling brooks, and savage races tend to broken badlands, mountain caverns, and windswept wastes. Humans have thrived as colonizers and tend to have a similar cosmopolitan attitude as the bronze dragons. Also, they have that dominant streak that asserts itself on their territory, as humans, while more accepting of humanoids outside their own race, are creatures that tend to enforce their own laws and morality on others, for better or for worse. And this is something that the bronze dragons most admires about the race. Bronze dragons are, for the most part, of a lawful good alignment. They have a very strong sense of right and wrong. They see the world as either law-abiding and good, or anarchic, chaotic and evil. They have a hard time when they run into individuals in situations that are either chaotic good or lawful evil. And there lies the fun to the enterprising dungeon master, but more on their attitudes later. These are big, tremendously powerful creatures. By the time they've reached adult size, they are already over a century old, and their young life has been full of adventure and danger. The majority of bronze dragons do not survive to adult breeding age, even though they are very tough, intelligent, and resourceful creatures. They throw themselves into danger over and over a long period of time, and the odds tend to stack up against them eventually. So when the character meets an adult, they have already fought behears and rocks, giants and sea serpents, taken on orc hordes and fleets of corsairs, dodged lethal boulders thrown by enraged hill giants, narrowly avoided getting harpooned or lanced, and will have many, many scars and trophies, and might have a necklace of behear claws or wear a single large rock feather. Bronze dragons are creatures of three worlds, by air or land or sea. They're not fond of adventuring underground, and prefer to lair in open seaside cliffs and the caves, where they find the sound of the roaring surf very soothing and enjoy the re-access to fish, their favourite food. Like most dragons, they only breed every few years and produce a small clutch of eggs, keeping them safe in a tidal rock pool, where they also keep a number of decoy egg-shaped rocks and some nasty jellyfish, giant crabs and toxin-filled spiny sea urchins, giant clams and other aquatic nasties to deter egg thieves and scavenging predators. The sea around a nesting bronze dragon may see unusually intense activity from merfolk, tritons and other sea elves. Possibly sea elves. There will be pods of orca, and just a general increase in the number of sea creatures and the intensity of their actions. Fishermen will lament the nets torn by threshing marlin, or lines snapped by the largest, strongest reef fish they've ever seen. The wise and observant fisherfolk will change tactics to setting baited crab pots, hauling them in twice as often as before, and enjoying the bounty of crabs, lobsters, and octopus. Dragons are creatures with a supernatural connection to the elements, and when they are born or dying, they tend to have an extraordinary influence on the natural world, stretching as far as a few miles from their lair. When the hatchlings emerge from the shells, they tend to hatch on nights where there is a ferocious thunderstorm, with lightning dancing across the roiling sky and the ocean lit with phosphorescent waves crashing against the rocky shore like streams of green and silver. Under the surface, merfolk will gather to witness the marvellous beauty, singing along with gathered whales in their slow haunting melodies. Far out to sea, sailors will not sleep a wink as they listen to the sounds coming through the ship's hull, as they rest in damp hammock beds, chewing charred tar and tobacco, sipping watered rum and telling tales of dragons. Hatchlings swell with the power of the storm and grow quickly on a steady diet of fresh sea life, and they are sheltered in the inaccessible rocky coves and sea caves, with the dragon parent is always on watch for other dragons, Sahuagin, Koatoa, sharks, and the evil sea serpents, as well as the vicious stingray-like servants of Demogorgon, the Ixatzarchitl, who will happily steal a young dragon to sacrifice it in some horrible ritual to their demon lord. From day one, the hatchlings are curious, boisterous and irrepressible, seeing a world full of adventures. They try at every opportunity to slip under the nose of their parent and go exploring, seeking out other intelligent beings to talk to and foes to fight. As they grow, their parents let them become naturally more independent and caution them with words of wisdom regarding foes they should not antagonize too much too soon. But still, more than a few bronze dragons have died to the lethal fangs of sea serpents or behir. In the latter case, more than a few behir have been hunted down and executed by an enraged adult bronze dragon shortly thereafter. Although in 5th edition there is a quick and simple transition from hatchling to young dragon stage, the 6 to 100 year stretch actually incorporates a few stages of growth and development. By age of 16, the young dragons will have started to collect their own treasure. They will show a noticeable burst of growth, and while they stay close to the parent's lair, they're a lot more independent of each other, striking out alone to hunt and explore. They'll have a large head and feet proportionate to their body, but they're a lot sharper mentally and are really starting to master their innate abilities, so be wary of giving them an excuse to release a blast of lightning, as at this stage they're not yet skilled enough to moderate the power that they let out. From 26 to 50 years old, they're juveniles and well on their way to becoming adults. So though not yet very involved in draconic society and politics, the adults basically let them blow off steam and go exploring. They're seen as individuals and are completely independent of their parents and siblings. At this stage, they are the size of an adult, but nowhere near the physical power. So they will seek out mystic study and develop a lust for magical items to add to their hoard, many of which they'll carry and use to defend themselves, particularly from older dragons. Juvenile dragons spend a lot of time either underwater or in the air, relying on speed and stealth as they seek a lair and continue their exploration of the world. Past 51 years of age, they're young adults looking for a place in draconic society. They turn their attention towards adult responsibilities and their own reputation as they slowly turn their thoughts towards eventual mating relationships with other dragons. Young adult dragons may be biologically ready to mate, but they also go through a process where they toughen up considerably because they have to deal with increased violence from potential rivals and more dominant adults. So they bulk up, their scales harden into armor, and they become more aggressive and tend to turn their attention towards draconic matters rather than the affairs of the smaller races. Adult bronze dragons enjoy at least another century of life in their vigorous youth. From the perspective of other dragons at least, they're still young. They will have their own lair, will have mated successfully and raised a young brood of their own. They'll be known to other dragons and probably have a relationship with some human community. Past 200 years, the dragon will have increased confidence. They'll no longer feel a need to seek out danger in order to prove their worth and increase their standing. They really only get riled up by other rival dragons when the things that they hold dear are threatened. Instead, they'll act with purpose and confidence, often launching schemes that take years to complete, including helping a population of humans establish themselves on distant islands or territory, such as when the explorers first set out from Faerun to create settlements on Mazdaca. Because of a mature bronze adult's power, their wealth, their influence, and their age, it's very rare that they remain unnoticed to the larger world. Its name becomes known, or at least among other dragons, and it often becomes the target of up-and-coming rival dragons or foolhardy adventurers who may make the mistake of thinking metallic dragons are less likely to kill someone who tries to steal from their hoard. One of a mature adult's first orders of business is to review and improve the defences of its young lair. For the bronze dragon, they make full use of their coastal environment, their blind sense that can see through clouds of jetting ocean spray from blowholes. They can combine their repulsion breath weapon with sickening drops into jagged rocks and flesh-shredding coral, decorate their lair with razor-edged seashells and horns of narwhals. and ground a series of puddles and pools. Some might actually be water-filled tunnels leading to the open ocean. All of them are good for splashing invaders, so the dragon's lightning breath weapon is even more effective. Often the dragon relocates periodically just as a matter of prudence. They never choose a new lair hastily, and they will usually include a plan to radically increase the treasure hoard along with the move. And here's one of the points I was going to get around to later. Bards' tales of dragons destroying kingdoms and seizing their treasures often have their roots in true accounts of what happens when a mature adult dragon is on the move. It is very important to realize that it doesn't matter if a dragon in question is chromatic or metallic. They will seek out and take treasure from other races. As a dungeon master, you need no excuse. Dragons seek out treasure, and when they find it, they take steps to secure it, and when they have it, they do not part with it. All dragons consider what humans do with precious metals and objects of art and wonder to be kind of fickle and pointless. It would be like going to a banquet and everyone is passing around food from table to table, but nobody's actually eating any of it. You're passing by these tables, groaning with masses of succulent food, your stomach rumbling, mouth watering, aching with hunger for a feast. But taking any food for yourself gets the other banquet guests quite upset, and they constantly try to steal the food back off your plate. When a dragon takes treasure, it feels very strongly that it needs it more than whoever is simply stockpiling it in some vault somewhere, staring at it or just counting it endlessly, moving it from here to there and squabbling over it. Once the dragon takes it, it's now on their dinner plate, and you do not steal food off the plate of a dragon. Even a good aligned dragon will take treasure from a good aligned kingdom. They'll simply do it in as non-violently a way as possible, and may pause to thank the kingdom for their generous donation. Given enough time, a kingdom can absorb a huge drain on their immediate wealth, but gain an invaluable edge in ocean-going trade and exploration, secure a source of bountiful fishing, and protection for city-destroying monsters. But it's very hard for a human to see past the drastic loss of a ton of gold, silver, and platinum. Dwarves, forget about it. They would rather die. Even gnomes will fight for the protection of their hoarded gemstones as though the dragon were literally stealing the babies from their cribs. Of all the races of civilization, humans tend to be able to swallow their anger and see an opportunity that they can adapt to. And this is why bronze dragons tend to admire them so much, and so often empty their treasure vaults and add them to their own hoards. It's an interesting dynamic from a storytelling perspective, particularly as a hoard of wealth being transported by a bronze dragon is catalyst for all sorts of absolute mayhem. And also, how do you think the dragon gets all that loot from one place to another? Carts driven by merfolk? Kobold riding giant iguana, specially trained pterodactyls, a friendly alliance with a bunch of young copper dragons, an entire village of fishermen, giant crabs with lockboxes riveted to their carapace. This is Dungeons & Dragons. Let your imagination off the leash and get fantastical. This is the sort of crazy stuff that people sit down at the table to experience in the first place. So fill your world with situations such as random encounters with dragon hordes on the move. Another very important aspect of the metallic dragon is their ability to shape change. An adult bronze dragon can magically polymorph into a humanoid or beast that has a challenge rating no higher than its own, or back into its true form, and of course that challenge rating incorporates a lot of variety. It reverts to its true form only if it dies, so they can shape-shift indefinitely, even while sleeping. However, they have quite a tremendous addiction to fish, and tend to eat enormous amounts of it, so they may duck off to do some fishing in their natural form now and then. Also, most important to out of our discussion on treasure, any equipment it is wearing or carrying is absorbed or borne by the new form. That's the dragon's choice. Now, how much gold and other loot can a dragon carry on itself at a time, particularly if it spent decades scouring the world for bags of holding and magical haversacks, portable holes and the like? Your character could be standing right next to a perfectly ordinary looking but very smart and urbane human who just happens to be an adult bronze dragon carrying hundreds of thousands of gold pieces worth of treasure concealed within them. And your character wouldn't have no idea. Next minute, several giants riding on rocks high above drop rocks on everyone, and they all die. I know it's a cliche, but these things do happen. Stat-wise, adult bronze dragons are formidable. As mentioned, they have 2 breath weapons. Unlike old editions, they recharge a random number of times per day, on a roll of a 6-sided dice at the end of the dragon's turn, even after they've used their breath weapon. On a roll of a 5 or 6 means they can use it again the very next round. This can play havoc with your strategy and planning out an encounter, so be prepared for the unlikely situation that, I don't know, the dragon has a cold or something and the dice just hate you and will not let you recharge their breath attack. Like the blue dragon, the bronze dragon is smart enough to make use of those marvellous, creepy inventions of the humans, the flesh golem. A blast of lightning will punish its foes and heal those golem minions, so they make excellent lair defenders and are also a great loot transportation pack creature, able to move tirelessly for mile after mile carrying hefty loads. The bronze dragon exhales lightning in a 90-foot line that's 5 feet wide. Each creature in that line must make a DC 19 dexterity saving throw. It will take 66 on average. That's 12 d10 lightning damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. Bronze dragons making an attack on the massed ranks of a marching army will use this with devastating effect, carving a path of death through the thickest concentrations of troops. Their armor and shields are useless before such an onslaught. Their second breath attack is a pulse of repulsion force, where the dragon exhales repulsion energy in a 30-foot cone. Each creature in that area must make a DC 19 saving throw, dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, the creature is pushed it's a strength saving throw. On a failed save, the creature is pushed 60 feet away from the dragon, and you can also work on the amount of weight that a creature with a strength of 19 can carry, and that's the amount of weight per 5-foot square that cone can affect. So the dragon can move with its breath weapon quite a vast amount of weight. Such a large assortment of, say, boulders with a single breath pulse that can launch them off the top of a cliff or start them tumbling down a steep slope towards a mass of enemies. Also, being shoved into a spiked wall is almost exactly the same effectively as falling into a spike-lined pit. So being thoughtful, be creative, and a little bit ruthless, because bronze dragons tend to be. They are very intelligent, with adults having an intelligence of 16, wisdom of 15, and a charisma of 19. They also have a supernatural frightful presence within 120 feet, which requires a DC 17 wisdom saving throw to resist, or the victims will simply attempt to flee for a full minute, unless they can make the saving throw on the next turn, after which they will be immune to that specific dragon's frightful present effect for up to 24 hours. I've not had the opportunity yet to try this out with a group of different dragons with overlapping terror effects, but it's on my list of things to do. Bronze dragons can make 3 melee attacks per round, on their turn, using a combination of their bite, claw, tail, or breath weapon. The physical attacks are all plus 12 to hit. Tail has a reach of 15 feet. The bite has a reach of 10 feet, and claws 5 feet. Tail does 2d8 plus 7 bludgeoning damage. Feel free to include a save for being knocked prone, the same as the repulsion breath if you want for that tail sweep. The bite does 2d10 plus 7 piercing damage, and each claw attack does 2d6 plus 7 slashing damage. The dragon has a natural armor class of 19 before adding any magical protection, and it undoubtedly uses magical protection. They've got an average of 212 hit points and a total pool of 17d12 plus 102 hit points. And try working that out for the hit dice next time you want to use a sleep spell on one. The mechanics of that spell really do suck. I've just got to add, I usually house rule that so that an individual saving throw versus the spellcaster's difficulty class is all that you need. It saves a ton of paperwork on the table, believe me. Bronze dragons are fully amphibious, able to breathe air or water indefinitely, and a speed of 40 feet per round on the land or in the water, with a flight speed of 80 feet per round in the air. Oh yeah. You can also take 3 legendary actions per round, taking these on the turns of other creatures or the player characters once they've finished everything that they were going to do. The dragon can choose to make a perception check or use a tail attack, or spend 2 of its out-of-turn actions in one go and use a wing attack, which the dragon beats its wings. Each creature within 10 feet of the dragon must make a DC 20 dexterity saving throw or take 2d6 plus 7 bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. The dragon can fly then up to half its speed. So this is a combination of attack and movement that makes the dragon very nimble in combat, and should certainly use that every chance that they get. The dragon will seek to blast and intimidate its enemies, then divide them up using repulsion, grapples, and throwing them, then move to isolate and concentrate attack on strategic targets. So they study magic, and they know the danger of ranged magic users and will attempt to absolutely murder them at the first opportunity. The player of the magic user or cleric is going to feel this is almost entirely unfair, but, well, dragons are very intelligent, and they have taken out groups of adventurers before, I assure you. You're not mean or metagaming, you are just representing the dragon's superior intellect and experience. So show no mercy and murder those spellcasters. Bite them, claw them, stomp them, and once they're down, and make sure they're dead. A dragon knows that just because a character is making death saving throw doesn't mean that it's out of the fight for good. So they will continue to inflict damage if they can until they can no longer hear a heartbeat with their sharp hearing. Remember that blind sense. They've got very sharp hearing and smell. Of course, bronze dragons are lawful good, which means they like rules and they have a personal code that they live by. They may simply strike to subdue, and personally I advise you to do this for a couple of reasons. First, you can absolutely go full force on the player characters and really show them just how lethal the dragons can be. I mean, go apeshit. Describe the sickening impacts, the fractured bones, the dizzying concussions, the agony of electrocution. As they're just thrown around like rag dolls, exhausted, abused, and overwhelmed by the power of the dragon. Then take all of their gear, truss them up, and throw them into a dragon prison, where the dragon waits for them to regain consciousness so it can read them the riot act and pronounce its sentence on them for the crimes committed against its property, its person, or any underlings who may have suffered damage or loss as well. Spending several weeks harvesting oysters off a rocky shore is not the worst that could happen. The character might even turn the daily oyster snack with the dragon into a lifelong friendship if they're wise. Some other little facts about bronze dragons. They mate for life. So if you kill one adult dragon, another one is probably going to very much want to kill your character at some stage. They do tend to congregate together in groups for far more than most other types of dragons, even the gregarious copper dragons. They're very closely allied with silver dragons, you'll often see them working together in almost everything except the raising of the young. And when large, fast ocean-going vessels are racing along with a good wind close to a rocky shoreline, they sometimes have groups of young bronze dragons swimming along the bow of the ship exactly the same way dolphins do, and they may even strike up a conversation with those on board. Oh yeah, that's right, the second reason why you should strike to subdue with dragons is to not kill the player characters and actually just involve them in the game further on. It's perfectly okay for them to be overwhelmed and become the captives of a superior force. It should go without mentioning, really. Famous dragons of the Forgotten Realms, just a few. Sherioth is of the Desserin Valley, the secretive protector of this noble Silmerhelve family's summer residence, Helvenblade House, which is located in the northwestern periphery of the Crypt Garden Forest, west of the Long Road as it runs north of Westbridge. This adult male dragon has resided there in secret for generations, ensuring the peace of this place. This relates directly to another bronze dragon, a somewhat more famous and well-known one, named Near-mir, who for a long time has also protected the Waterdeep family of Silmerhelve, which he seems to have chosen at random back in 1032 DR. He was kind of exemplified the strong relationship with bronze dragons and with a particular family line of humans, and believes that humanity is actually better than metallic dragons. His thinking is simple, really. Metallic dragons were created by Bahamut to do good, and they must not turn away from that. But lesser species can freely choose to be good, and he often points to the Harpers and the Order of the Gauntlet as two examples of this theory. His activities and presence is not merely or entirely about his relationship with that family, though, as the last time he was summoned to the Metallic Dragons Council, he reported on the menace of the Cult of the Dragon and the rise of Tiamat during the period covered in the adventure module called Tyranny of Dragons. Another interesting thing about Near-mir is he stood up in its staunch defense of humanity against the anti-humanoid bias of the very powerful gold dragon named Prothanta, who he thought that humans... Prothanta thought that humans attained too much Too many powers, too short a time for them to ever develop the wisdom necessary to use such power safely. And one has to admit that history leans heavily in support of his damning of idiot humanoids. Yes, we're looking at you, Casas. Back in 1373 DR, following the suggestions of the winged elf Avariel named Tegan Nightwind, Queen Cymbril of Impiltur agreed to send a small contingent to the Grey Forest to destroy a Cult of the Dragon hideout. Among the expeditionary force was also 6 young bronze dragons, one being Quel'Sandus. However, Quel'Sandus had previously made an agreement with the Archmage Samaster, that evil guy who invented the process of creating Dracoliches, to betray his human allies in exchange for being spared from the effects of the Dragon Rage Mythal. Thus, at the chosen time, before ambushing the cultist army, he surprised and turned on the Impilturan troops, casting a spell to drive the other bronze dragons mad with a frenzy. Unfortunately, Quel'Sandus found himself betrayed as well, because although he was promised immunity, the spell actually, he cried out in despair as he too was afflicted. And in the resulting fight, where he lost all sense of himself and succumbed to the rage, he and a heroic paladin both perished in the battle. Those of you who have read through or played the adventurous Storm King's Thunder may also remember the bronze dragon Felgiris, who was left on Toril by his plains-travelling parents and spent much of his early life in the company of the Archmage Thongomir Storm Spells Halorgoth of Helruar. Thongomir was a kind old collector of rare plants and mosses, and together the wizard and the dragon lived many adventures in southern Faerun searching for plants. At one point, Thongomir magically altered Felgiris in order to make certain spells work upon the draconic steed a little bit better. In the late 1480s DR, or early 1490s DR, Felgiris paid a visit to the cloud giant Countess Sansuri on her flying castle, but instead Sansuri imprisoned him in order to extract from him information to locate one of the ancient Ostorian markets. Felgiris didn't actually know anything about what Sansuri was searching for, so he languished in prison for quite some time. He has shown up in all sorts of places, actually, always somewhat carefree and self-reliant, with a peculiar knack for surviving situations of great peril he always seems to blunder into. Like, subscribe, check out my Patreon for some exclusive content as well as all of the full scripts for all of these videos. Buy some merchandise, wear your geek with pride. Check out Patron Blades for a mighty smooth shave in the description down below. As always, thanks for listening everyone. I'll be back with more for you very soon.